Thanks, Jude Home, for staying with us for the next hour. We've got sort of a big hour of news today on a day when we did not expect to have this much news. Here in New York City, was the locus for a lot of today's news in a way that we also did not expect. Lots of cities in America have like a Chinatown or even a Little Italy. Orange County, California, famously has its own Little Saigon. But New York City is the only city in America, I think, that can pull off simultaneously having a Chinatown, also a Little Italy, also a Little Saigon, also a Koreatown, also a little Pakistan, a little Tokyo, a little Panama, a little Albania, a little you name it. New York City is not only diverse in its population, New York City is international in a way that no other city in the world, let alone this country, is. But still, when the United Nations General Assembly convenes in New York City, even in a city like New York, you feel it. And you feel it not just because of all the traffic that it causes, but because there is a sudden international influx of world leaders and their entourages and their issues. Even the protests change. New York City always has protests, but it's only when the UN is in session that we have something like this, an anti-Iran, Russia, China, Syria protest being led by activists from Egypt, Iran, Palestine, Syria, Tunisia, and Yemen. In terms of protests inside the UN, though, this year was a particularly good year for what's come to be known as the annual Walkout on Mahmoud Day. This happens every year. The president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, stands up to give his speech, shirt, jacket, no tie. He's very short. He gets up to give his speech. He starts denying the Holocaust. He starts demonizing America. Now he's also a 9/11 truther, for the record. And every year, like clockwork, when he does that speech in that suit and that shirt with no tie, this happens.
While the president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, was giving his speech to the General Assembly, a walkout took place. Dozens of delegates, as you see there, led by the U.S. They gathered their stuff, and with some drama, they walked out. The reason why they walked out, his speech called the U.S. slave masters and colonial masters. Then he went after the rest of the allies. Then he talked about the, quote, mysterious September 11th incident. For him, it was more or less the usual stuff, but it was too much for some of the delegates.
This is quickly becoming a New York City tradition. This year's Mahmoud Walkout Day was particularly good, as you saw there. But, I mean, last year's Mahmoud Walkout Day was a classic, too. Remember? There was Ahmadinejad starting his annual speech, right? Jacket, shirt, no tie. And then, look at that. There go the U.S. diplomats, followed shortly thereafter by the Brits, by the Spaniards, by the Swedes. Yeah, Spaniards, the Swedes, and, oh, heck, eventually the entire European Union as well. There were actually two Mahmoud walkouts in 2010. A few months before that one you just saw, there was Ahmadinejad starting another speech at the UN, this time wearing glasses. And then look at that. Yep, there they go. There go all the diplomats. This is sort of the diplomatic equivalent of a one-finger, middle-finger salute. Everybody sort of pensively packs up their briefcases, and then they try to plan their means of walking out of the room so that it is as ostentatious as possible. Never walk away from the podium, for example, when you can walk toward it before breaking to one side to leave the room. Of course, nothing will ever top the Mahmoud Walkout Day from 2009. This was also the UN, but it was in Geneva. I don't know if it's just that room or whatever, but Mahmoud Walkout in Geneva 2009 was perfect.
In conversation. For the dire consequences.
That was definitely the best walkout ever. The guy stopping and taking a picture of him from like 3 feet away from him at the end of the aisle. Oh, I love the walkout on the Iranian president time of year. President Obama addressed the UN General Assembly yesterday morning, and then he started an entire day of bilateral meetings with other world leaders, including, crucially, the Prime Minister of Israel and the head of the Palestinian Authority. Tonight, diplomats are still trying to avert a request for statehood by the Palestinians at the United Nations tomorrow. As President Obama was engaged engaged in those meetings. An entire day of speeches by other world leaders unfolded in front of the main body of the UN. And aside from the diplomatic awkwardness that is the hallmark of international gatherings like this, there was one other very specific bit of awkwardness brought on by the fact that the UN is located here in New York City. Because the other thing that New York City is in America, aside from being our nation's largest population center and the most international of all U.S. cities, New York City also has the greatest concentration of American zillionaires. And while the leaders of nations like Lebanon and Equatorial Guinea and Estonia were speaking yesterday at the UN, the magazine Forbes simultaneously released its list of the 400 richest individual people in America. And some of those people, as individuals, have a larger personal net worth than the economies of entire countries like, say, Lebanon, Equatorial Guinea, or Estonia. Some American individual people have more money than some individual entire countries. One of the big headlines out of the Forbes 400 list this year is for Charles and David Koch, the Koch brothers. Their father, of course, invented a way to turn oil into gasoline. They inherited Dad's company, and importantly, they did not take it public. It is a private company, which means that anything the company makes redounds to them as individuals, and boy, does it. They have had a banner year, their combined net worth jumping by more than 40% in the past year. The Koch brothers are up to $50 billion in personal wealth right now. And that means that as of this year, Charles and David Koch, as two people, have more money than the GDP of Sri Lanka, Slovenia, Bulgaria, Oman, Tunisia, Guatemala, Uruguay, Lebanon, Serbia, Uzbekistan, Lithuania, Costa Rica, and all of the other countries that you see scrolling by you right now. If the Koch brothers wanted to, buy Samoa, not the cookie, but the country, Samoa's GDP is $565 million, which means that the Koch brothers could personally buy roughly 88 Samoas and still have change left over. The Koch brothers have, look at the country still, yeah, okay. The Koch brothers have done really, really great with the oil and chemical conglomerate they inherited from their dad. It was the second largest privately held company in the entire country. Over the last few years, their combined net worth as two people has skyrocketed from $34 billion in 2007 to $50 billion now. They have always been rich, and I mean really rich. But in the last 5 years, the Koch brothers' net worth has been swelling like a broken ankle. It has been an awesome, awesome time for them as two men. But during that time, Koch Industries, the company, the source of their wealth, has seen something a little different happen. Here's how employment levels have changed at Koch Industries during this same time period. Koch Industries has shed employees by the tens of thousands, as the Koch brothers have gotten personally billions and billions and billions of dollars richer. Wait a minute, though. I thought rich people were the job creators. And corporations, the job creators, right? The Koch brothers are rich people, and they privately hold this corporation. And yet the more money they seem to make, the fewer Americans they seem to employ. Now, there's no reason to single out the Koch brothers on that front. I mean, it is illustrative to do so. But this is basically the story of corporations and of rich people in the country right now. As corporate profits are sky high right now, as America's biggest corporations are seeing profits 26% higher than they were a year ago, we know from the unemployment figures that those profits are not translating into jobs for Americans. For a company like ExxonMobil, for example, that is sort of how it's been in recent years. As ExxonMobil has seen its revenue go up and up and up and up and, oh my God, even further up, the number of people employed by Exxon has gone down and down and down. As President Obama and Democrats have proposed dealing with the deficit and the fiscally disastrous legacy of the Bush tax cuts that mostly benefited the richest people in this country, as Democrats have talked about dealing with those problems by increasing the amount of taxes that rich people pay, congressional Republicans have responded by calling rich people job creators. If you are rich, you are by definition a job creator to today's Republicans. And that is very cute to be called a job creator. But again, rich people are doing astonishingly well right now. And that does not appear to be translating into them hiring lots of people. Although if you ask the Koch brothers funded group Americans for Prosperity, quote, we know that decreasing taxation and regulatory burdens on job creators and innovators is the only policy design that has ever lifted people out of poverty, spurred economic growth, and created jobs. This is the basic economic fight right now in the country. The right, including the conservative groups bankrolled by Charles and David Koch, trying to make the case that the richest people in the country and corporations are the key to the economy. That although they admittedly are doing really awesome right now, if they could just do a little more awesome, if we could just figure out some way to cut their taxes and let them make more profit, that will result in there being more jobs for other people and everything being better for everybody. Corporate tax cuts and tax cuts for very, very rich people like the Koch brothers will, in the words of Americans for Prosperity, quote, lift people out of poverty. Or at least it will help them build the pile of $50 billion they are already sitting on into an even bigger pile while their company keeps laying people off. On the other side of that fight are the Democrats and the almost united front they are finally getting around to showing for the president's jobs agenda, which does include this very populist message.
Would you rather that the oil companies get to keep their tax loopholes? Or would you rather make sure that we're hiring thousands of construction workers to rebuild America? Would you rather keep in place special tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires? Or would you say, let's get teachers back in the classroom so our children can learn? Now, the Republicans, when I talked about this earlier in the week, they say, well, this is class warfare. You know what? If asking a billionaire to pay their fair share of taxes, to pay the same tax rate as a plumber or a teacher, is class warfare, then you know what? I'm a warrior for the middle class. I'm happy to fight for the middle class. I'm happy to fight for working people.
That basic policy idea apparently is stupefying to the pundit class and to the Beltway media, who cannot believe how far Obama is going out on a limb by campaigning on something like this. The policy of raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans is a policy supported by huge majorities of the American people, including something like 70 to 80% of people who describe themselves as moderates. This is a really popular idea, and every Democrat in the country can run on this very popular idea. And Democrats who are good at articulating this idea, I think, will run on this idea to great effect. Por ejemplo.
I hear all this, well, this is class warfare, this is whatever. No, there is nobody in this country who got rich on his own. Nobody. You built a factory out there, good for you, but I want to be clear. You moved your goods to market on the roads the rest of us paid for. Yep. You hired workers the rest of us paid to educate. You were safe in your factory because of police forces and fire forces that the rest of us paid for. You didn't have to worry that marauding bands would come and seize everything at your factory and hire someone to protect against this because of the work the rest of us did. Now look, you built a factory and it turned into something terrific or a great idea. God bless. Keep a big hunk of it. But part of the underlying social contract is you take a hunk of that and pay forward for the next kid who comes along.
The right wing is circulating that video today as if it is something that looks bad. I think they are believing their own rhetoric about what people think about ideas like that. I think the more that gets circulated, the better people like Elizabeth Warren and other people with that message are going to do with a broad swath of Americans left, right, and center. Elizabeth Warren is probably the Democrats' best communicator on economic issues, other than maybe President Obama himself. She is now running for the United States Senate in Massachusetts against the #1 recipient of hedge fund industry contributions in the entire country, Republican Senator Scott Brown. Elizabeth Warren has been in that race in Massachusetts for about a week. She is now leading Scott Brown. Scott Brown previously thought to have an absolutely impenetrable positive approval rating in Massachusetts. But as of right now, as of the most recent poll, Elizabeth Warren ahead by 2. Populist economic messaging tends to work for Democrats. So you've got people like Elizabeth Warren out there running on that. You've got President Obama out there running on that. You've even got rich guy Warren Buffett now being drafted to go campaign for President Obama on this issue starting next month. This is the fight going on in the country right now. These are the two sides. Koch brothers and the Republicans on the rich people just need more side, and the Democrats pushing the tax the rich Warren Buffett rule on the other side. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing that's new this week that you need to know. On that new Forbes 400 list, the Koch brothers combined are now a lot richer than Warren Buffett. Many billions of dollars richer. Game on.